freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. Coretta Scott King.
Where there is light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. Where there is beauty in the person, there is harmony in the home. Where there is harmony in the home, there is honor in the nation. Where there is honor in the nation, there is peace in the world.
Time is on the side of the oppressed today. It's against the oppressor. Truth is on the side of the oppressed today. It's against the oppressor. You don't need anything else. Malcolm X.
It's important for us to also understand that the phrase Black Lives Matter simply refers to the notion that there is a specific vulnerability for African Americans that needs to be addressed. It is not to suggest that other lives don't matter. It is to suggest that other folks aren't experiencing this same vulnerability. President Barack Obama.
Where there is light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. Where there is beauty in the person, there is harmony in the home. Where there is harmony in the home, there is honor in the nation. Where there is honor in the nation, there is peace in the world.
Where you see wrong or inequality or injustice, speak out, because this is your country. This is your democracy. Make it, protect it, pass it on. Thurgood Marshall.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth session of Table for More. We're so excited to have you here to wrap up our August of work together, and Philip, who's going to guide us home with our action plans. Just a reminder that we will be going into role-based breakout sessions today. So I'm going to drop in the chat our breakout rooms, and if once again you will rename yourself with the number that you would self-select for the room as the first thing of your name. So I would say 5, voice teacher, Elizabeth Eschen. So if you could be doing that as we go through this beginning session, that will help me assign breakout rooms so we can go right in. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. So delighted to be with you today for this fourth session. I cannot believe it's the end of August. I'm in denial personally that summer is almost over, but that's just how it is. But as I reflect back, I can think of no better way to spend my Wednesday mornings than with each of you who has taken the time to gather here for these presentations and conversations. And I can assure you that today there's gonna be a lot of conversation because it's just me, so I get to manage the whole clock. Like, wasn't that a fabulous presentation last week from Daryl and from Marcus, and then the week before from Quanice and Tasidra? Sometimes, again, we plan things and we just flex a little. But today you're gonna spend a lot of time reflecting on things and beginning this process. This is the end of our webinars, but this is the beginning of your journey in this work, hopefully. That's the plan, that's the dream. I want to invite us to sing together. So this is something, the piece that I shared with you, by the way, was created in COVID. It's the only project that we did where we never rehearsed together at all. In fact, I never rehearsed that one bit with our singers. I gave them the guide tracks. They chose this in conjunction with the ensemble Cantus in the wake of the George Floyd murder here in the Twin Cities. And I thought it was especially appropriate given what's happened just a couple of days ago, not too far from me in Wisconsin with Jacob Blake. So this song, my friend Troy Robertson and Cora Moore was an organization that was birthed out of COVID to help people come together and process how we could make music during this time. And there's a lot of webinars and training on video editing and things of that nature. But there's some music that came out of this process too that was designed to be sung in online platforms. So this is I Will Be the Change, and I thought it was a great way for us to begin our work together today. So you're gonna hear my voice guiding you through, but I wanna see your faces singing on the other side there. So I'm gonna get this started here. It's very improvisatory. Got a nice feel to it there, hip hop feel. I will be the change I want to see in the world. I will be the change I want to see in the world. I will be the change I want to see in the world. Now join me. If you're feeling bold, you can snap your fingers. Rock out a little bit. I see you, Craig. Let's sing this one more time now. I will be the change I want to see in the world. I will be the change I want to see in the world. I will be the change I want to see in the world. I will be the change I want to see in the world. There we go. Thanks for singing with me. I just want to give you a little sample there. A little singing, getting us going this morning. See, I did it, Liz. I got us in. We made some music today. I wanted to remind you of something that, this is a paraphrase of what a colleague of mine, Ahmed Andaluza, who is a Mexican Egyptian composer, conductor, pianist based here in the Twin Cities, a colleague of mine. And he, in paraphrase, was talking about coming across the border and life at the border and getting to America and talking about how race was embedded into everything. And it made me reflect on and thinking that race is at the center of everything we do here in America. And it was part of the reason why we took the title Table for More Race, Access, Inclusion with the capital C and equity, was that idea of embedding race in the middle of these conversations. Because in reality, everything that we are talking about, you could change out and substitute ableism, gender, all kinds of other societal issues, and the same principles would transfer and apply. But it's really race that's at the core of everything that we're experiencing, and it's the most visible challenge that I think we face, our race and our cultural identity. So with that framework, here's what we're going to do today. We've already sung, so we can check that off. I'm going to do a quick recap with you and talk about some of the things that have been on your mind. And then we're going to delve right into this action planning model idea, tangible steps towards change, and give you lots of things to process, send you to breakout rooms, and I'm going to hover around and join those conversations. And then we'll do a final challenge for you, Q&A. And then the dessert is for those who want to hang on and stay until 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we'll talk a little more. So let's dive in. I'm not going to say anything about these 12. You've seen them now for 3 weeks. This is the 4th week. Just want to give you a few seconds to remind ourselves of how we're going to orient and how we're going to engage with each other, especially when we get into the conversation portion of this. But then I want to add 4 new ones. And this is really for today and the work that you are beginning. You've been here 4 weeks. That means you're really serious about this. And so as you move forward now into planning actions and outcomes and steps, can you do this where you are fully present with your head and your heart? We often lead with one and not the other. Can they both go in tandem? Because to do this work, we need both. We passionately need to bring our heart and the compassion side with our head. Can you apply this information not just to your work, but to yourself, your own life, the way that you lead your life, your core values, what motivates you? Can you reflect on your own personal life and then let it reflect on your work life as well? Both of those also need to be connected together. Third, this is an expression that has really helped me the last 12 years. One of my mentors, Leon Thurman, the founder of the Voice Care Network, talked about singing and the pathfinders that we use, these exercises, as target practice. And we take target practice. We don't try, we do. It's like throwing darts is the way I take it. Whenever we go to throw darts in a pub, we just throw the darts, and sometimes we get the bullseye, 90% of the time we don't, but we keep throwing the darts, right? And we just do it again. We don't sit there and analyze why we didn't do it and pause. We just throw the doggone dart. And in our work, both as pedagogues, I ask you to apply this as, vocal teachers and choral directors, that you empower your singers to just do and not try. It will transform their experiences, especially with new concepts. But also in this process where we are getting out of our comfort zone, we're embracing that messy middle, just take target practice. Just commit to something, take an action, put one foot in front of the other, do it, and then step back and evaluate it and do it again. And maybe you do it the same way, maybe you do it differently. Finally, commit to non-closure. This is a marathon. And I know a marathon does have an end, but all I've run is some 10Ks. I will never run a marathon. I have great respect for those who do. So from my perspective, a marathon is a never-ending thing, right? So commit to this being a long-term process where there's going to be a lot of open-endedness. The road's going to wind, directions are going to change. So let's review a little bit. We've talked about race from the standpoint of affirming and empowering identities, from the standpoint of how if we connect with artists of diverse backgrounds, we affirm the identities of our singers in our groups, but also those who might be looking to connect with us. And if we explore wide ranges of genres, timbres, and learning styles, once again, we have a chance to engage with those already in our ensembles and in our studios, but also those on the outside who might be looking for a way in. And as we discovered last week, we can do this very easily just by embracing composers from different cultures who write in the same idioms that we are used to in our spaces. So it's not about throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as that crazy expression goes. We've looked at access. Access, the idea of identifying barriers, articulating the who and the why, who's on the outside looking in and why are they on the outside looking in? And after identifying, articulating those barriers, beginning to remove those barriers, providing that space. We've looked at inclusion, and I've challenged you to think about it as belonging, but also inclusion is embracing differences where the people count, individuals count. Equity, we've talked about everyone getting exactly what they need to be successful, where we address and we ameliorate the disparities. We make things better. So in equity, it's the outcomes that matter. And once again, Tasidra said it really well. She said, I can't separate access, equity, and inclusion in my mind. And I totally respect that, and I get that. We broke it down for this conversation, but I do agree that they are all interconnected and woven together. So that's where we've been on our journey. What's been on your mind? This came from the free writes that some of you asked, and here are 3 things that we've not talked about. Someone said, how do I diversify my audiences, my donors, and my board? I'm not convinced that just by having more diverse artists and programming that will automatically diversify our audience. And I will say yes, and you're absolutely right that just by changing your programming, it's not going to change your audience. It's not even going to change your constituents in your ensembles or in your studios. But it is a part of this woven process when combined with some of the action planning that we're going to talk about later. You will see that change. It comes back to the intention. If we are just diversifying to highlight difference, and that's what diversity is, it's in a sense of acknowledging the differences there, and I won't say putting it on display, but we're recognizing that. If it's merely checking a box and just putting it out there, that's not the type of relationship building that we need, the transformational thing that needs to happen to allow for your constituency to be diversified. Today, we're going to talk about how we get there. This person said, the second person, how do we engage those not currently at the table in the work, especially if they already think they are woke or are unintentionally doing harm, even though they do not think they are? First of all, I really appreciated this person's comments. They even started out with by saying how this has been great. Feels like we're preaching to the choir a little bit, and I kind of chuckled a little bit on that. The word woke makes me laugh all the time. Like, what does that mean? Like, I really do know what it means, but it's like when I see that, I'm like, what does that mean? And no disrespect intended to this person if you're in the room, because I feel the same way in asking the question, but each and every one of us is doing harm unintentionally, myself included. Every encounter, every interaction, we are engaging with culture based on our current set of experiences and the ways that we know to interact with culture. And none of us have really excelled completely in adaptive cultural behavior. Today, I'm going to introduce intercultural competency, which is a continuum of learning where we process our developmental learning of how we engage with our culture and with other cultures. And even if you were to master intercultural competency, that's really only saying that you have mastered the ability to adapt and relate to one other culture. Think of how many cultural differences there are in our societies, in our groups, in our studios. So I have to respectfully say we are all unintentionally doing harm, and none of us are as woke as we think we are. So the biggest thing in engaging at the table here is focusing on ourselves first, because that's the one thing that we can change. We can really change and reflect on who we are, how we engage, and how we present to the world and model behavior to the world, which then allows other people to engage with us. And then the conversation opens and we can invite them to experience working on change for themselves. So that's really the best answer that I have there. And again, this is going to come out of where we're going. The third one is a really tactical thing, right? We all are here. How do we broaden our membership and stay true to our mission? And this person specifically was talking about repertoire. You know, it does come back to core values. And if you do want to stay true to your mission, you've got to articulate that and live by that. And then today we're going to give you the skills to unpack then what are the steps you're going to need to take to allow your membership to broaden. And what do you mean by broaden? You know, because when you say broad membership, are you talking about racially, social economically, faith perspective, gender identity, social status? You know, there's so many ways that we identify and we lump them all together. And one of the challenges is for you as you leave here to begin to be really specific in the way you talk about who you're looking to engage with and when and why. So hopefully these three folks who ask these questions, you're going to get some of your answers as we go through this process of where I need to go and what I need to do. So here we begin talking about this action planning. It starts with taking a deep look within ourselves, each and every one of us. What is culture? Not culture from the standpoint of racial identity, but the culture of your organization, your studio. Culture is about the shared patterns that help us make meaning of our environment, and it's how we determine appropriate behavior. I've just started work at a new church. It's a Lutheran church, and they had a long-time choir director about 20 years ago. And many of them are known as Ronnie's kids. And I've already heard in the first Zoom rehearsal, we always end with this particular prayer. Okay, it's just the way we do things around here, right? There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but when you put up those kinds of block ends of this is how we do it around here, then you have thrown the gauntlet out of, I dare you to change the structure. I dare you to move outside of these parameters because we are right and you are wrong. And so in looking within ourselves, we have to first figure out how much of an appetite does our organization, do we have to really change and to be open to other ways of doing things? Remember the idea of two things can be true at once? How open are we to living into that? If you look on the right here at the image of the iceberg, which is a tool for guiding systemic thinking, most of the times we live in the events area, the react. These are the things above the surface, right? If you think about all of these conversations, and again, no judgment because I'm glad we're having this conversation, but this conversation probably wouldn't be happening this summer, A, if we weren't in a pandemic, and B, if it hadn't been for the series of events that happened this summer, you know, between May and June. We would not be having this conversation. We're reacting. What we want to do is to get beneath the surface to begin to anticipate. And many of us do this in our work. We see the trends over time, we can anticipate, and we start planning ahead. Even better would be to get the underlying structures, you know, what has caused these patterns of behavior, and if we can focus on that, then that leads us to making decisions. But what we're really seeking for, and all of us are on this journey, and again, myself included, because everything I say to you is what I'm challenging myself to do on my own personal journey and in the organizational journeys that I work with in, is can we be transformative? Can we really transform our mental model, the assumptions, the beliefs, the values that we hold, not so much to change people's beliefs, but can we understand why people hold certain beliefs and certain values and use that as the context for the systems that we're trying to change? If we can work with the underlying beliefs and address those, then we have a chance to address and change systems. If we're just trying to change outcomes and programs and products and visible things, we're above the surface and we're never going to get at the root cause. I think about you voice teachers out there. The best voice teachers are not talking about the sounds coming out of the mouth as much as the sensations that you are feeling in the process, and guiding your singers through that process of what did you experience? Do it again. What did you notice? How did that feel, right? That's trying to get at these mental models under the surface. So that's what we have to think about if we really want to change culture. I want to invite you to watch this little 3-minute video. I couldn't do it better. So the caricatures are really comical. It's not mine, but it really will get at the difference between transactional and transformational. In this case, it's about leadership, but we're going to apply it to the terms of relationships and everything that we do. So enjoy.
As an introduction, here are two common styles of leadership. One is called transactional and the other transformational. Once you've read through these two types, you'll be able to take a quick assessment in order to determine your own current leadership style. Whilst transactional leaders would usually work within boundaries and have set established outcomes, a transformational approach is more future conscious and dynamic. Transactional leadership. If you are a transactional leader, you'll be task and results driven whilst adhering to strict organisational boundaries. Additionally, you'd be motivated to reward people and evaluate performance regularly. You'll be focused on ensuring activities are completed efficiently and effectively. This style of leadership can become especially useful when dealing with strict deadlines and are constrained with resources. It maintains group dynamics whilst evaluating how each team member or employee performs their given task. Transformational leadership If you're a transformational leader, you'll focus on engaging and enthusing employees, making sure they understand how their work will help deliver your vision within the company and the values of the organisation. As a transformational leader, you'll lead by example whilst inspiring your team to drive change and achieve a common goal. There are important differences between transactional and transformational leaders. There are important differences between transactional and transformational leaders. A transactional leader will understand how rewarding someone will result in more effort being made, whilst a transformational leader will motivate their staff in order to get the best out of them without having to constantly reward. Transactional leadership is more reactive to present concerns, whilst a transformational leader is more hands-on, and by doing this creates higher expectations in their workers. A transactional leader will use methods such as carrot and stick motivation in order to control workers, as opposed to transformational leaders who inspire their staff in order to motivate them. In order to motivate, a transactional leader will set boundaries whilst producing rewards if goals are met. Transactional leadership is dependent on how well a leader is able to motivate. But transformational leaders have excellent managerial qualities, bond with their team, and build strong relationships.
So I hope that sits with you a little bit there. I have to chuckle every time there's that little pause in the middle where they messed up something. That almost made me not show it. But I was like, it's worth it to see this. And I think even with the caricatures there, it's very powerful. Do you know that in many cultures, in many communities outside of the United States, but also in certain facets of the United States, where there are people of color, leaders build relationships, and the ways they lead is by getting to know the people that they manage or oversee very personally. They get to know as much about their lives, their journeys as possible, and they basically become friends. And it's by that relationship building that they then are able to authentically motivate and inspire and understand where their employees are coming from. Now, most of you probably were not raised that way, and I fought this my whole life. My dad owned a clothing store. The clothing store was called Saul and Harry's. Now, I'm a black man, so you go figure, where do we get Saul and Harry's from, right? It's because he bought it from the two Jewish brothers, Saul and Harry's. And one of my favorite memories is people would walk in the store looking for the owners, and he's like, it's me. Well, where's the other owner? It's just me. It's just the black guy. He kept the store name the same. And I watched him interact with the employees who were 95% black over the 20 years that he owned the business. And that was my only job that I had through high school. I would go and help him. And it was very much relational. We knew everything about Miss Emma's life. She was the seamstress. We knew everything about everybody's life and what they were doing. And we were there for them in times of need, and they were there for us. And it was through that relation building that when times got tough and he had to file for bankruptcy, that he was able to really work with them, and they were able to work with him as things had to change and salaries had to be cut, and no one left. They stayed because they understood what he was going through, and he assured them that they were going to be the focal point of maintaining a job. He wasn't going to fire them. He wasn't going to let them go. We were going to figure out another way to get out of bankruptcy. You know, it was all about the relationship building that allowed him to be successful. Most of us were taught to keep that distance in the ways we teach, in the way we conduct, in the way we make music oftentimes, but just in the way that we engage with people in community. So as an organization, I put 4 things on the left here that we could just consider. You know, think about the way responsibilities work when you're looking to collaborate within your organization on a project, you know, across different divisions of your organization, or with outside organizations. Do you divvy up responsibilities based on position? Is it assumed that the artistic director is going to get certain things, or the executive director is going to do this and that? Or do you really define specifically for the occasion based on skill sets and the needs? One of the things that I can say about Vocal Essence that I've appreciated in this time, I've been the person driving the COVID-19 procedures, not just for our singers, but for the whole organization. And it just kind of worked out that way that I was the one who had the most interest and the most access to knowledge. Our executive director is on the team, but she's not driving the bus. And that's the idea of an organization beginning to play with the idea of letting other people sometimes take the lead, even though that's not their role normally. Product. You know, are you looking for an established product when you collaborate within your organization or with another organization? Or do you figure out what that product is going to be based on a process? And we're going to talk more about this later. Like, do you go into that conversation with a predefined idea, or do you let it evolve? Outcomes, are they planned or are they discovered? And then the frequency, and this is the big one. Is it a one-off, or are you planning for a relationship and an opportunity for this to happen over time? Everything on the left is transactional. Okay? It's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with transactional interactions. It's a part of what we do in life. It will always be a part of what we will do in life. But transactional interactions, when it comes to making room for more in our art form, will never lead to sustainability. It will always lead to a few things that happen, but will not lead to sustainable change. Transformational approaches and interactions will lead to that sustainability and that change we're looking for. So you've seen this before. I slightly adjusted it because now we're getting to the action plans. So here are 6 tangible actions that do support making a table for more. It was one of the first questions I asked you. So these are a set of objectives that you can just have with you on your table at all times as you think about the work that your organization is doing. Does everything you do check one of these categories off? And I am using that term check it off for this conversation for just a moment because it's giving you a way to categorize the programming, the actions, the repertoire, the things that you are building together for your organization. I think in some instances it is good to have a checkpoint there to see, am I meeting certain criteria to help me move towards a larger goal? So I hope that makes sense why I'm saying check it off. You can celebrate cultures of color. You can amplify voices, which again, remember, amplify is to give a larger platform to voices of color. You can commission composers of color. You can hire artists of composers of color. You can develop initiatives that reduce barriers to participation, that provide access, in other words. And then also you can make your programming accessible to the communities of color. So these last two are different because number 5, to me, develop initiatives that reduce barriers to participation is about actually engaging in singing in our studios or in our choirs. And the 6th one, making programming available to community colors, is about audiences, patronage, board members, things of that nature. So I encourage you, as the first part of your action plan, is to take this and make it a spreadsheet or a table and create that table in conjunction with whatever you're doing for your season. So make it a grid where you have your x-axis and your y-axis, doesn't matter which one goes where, but put all of your programs, everything that you're gonna do, and just go down the grid and see how many you're checking off, which ones are you checking off. If there's a program that doesn't check any of these, the question is, should you be doing that program or does something need to change if really we are looking to make a table for more throughout our whole organization? Because from my standpoint, we're not looking at, and when I came to Vocal Essence, and I use my experiences as an example because it's real for me and hopefully tangible for you, we had the Witness program, which celebrates the contributions of African Americans. It's been there for 30 years. And we had the Cantere program, which celebrates the contributions of Mexican composers coming to write pieces in Minnesota schools. Those were the 2 programs, and the rest of the year, you occasionally saw a composer of color, but it wasn't integrated together. It was very siloed. And again, it was great that we were doing this work, but it was very siloed. It was almost like, oh, you need to save that for Witness. That'll go in the Witness concert. Oh, no, we'll do that during Cantere. We'll get that in the spring concert. You get where I'm coming from? So there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think that's the way we want to go if you're really looking to change your organization to be a table for more where people are going to participate. Because you're not going to get a singer to come and say, well, I'm just joining you for Cantere in May, so I'll be back in March when you start that music. That's not the change that we want. We want it to be embedded into the whole process of what we're doing. So this is the first thing that I share with you. Take these 6 categories, use it as a grid for your planning. Transformational action planning, my theory for change. I am an artist, so I've been really working hard with my administrator hat of, thinking more specifically. And theory of change, if you don't know that language, you can look it up. It's a big part of when you're starting new programs and evaluating programs, that you have a goal in mind of what you are looking to do and achieve down the road. And it's going to change, but it gives you a way to write down action steps. So here's the theory of change that I suggest for you, for your action planning. It's 4 steps, but it is complicated and it's connected. First, you provide ongoing opportunities for learning and growth. Ongoing is the key word there. This can come through the form of book clubs, through the clubs of movies, watching movies together. And I'm thinking about race in specific here. I will share in the chat in a little while. There's a whole process of racial identity. And I am the father of biracial children. And so one of the things that I've learned is that they're going to interact with race and see race differently than I do. And so there are systems out there and people who've done the work already that we can look at these systems of how white people see cultural identity and identify themselves, and how Black people, not just Black, but those of African descent and those from other parts of the world, biracial. It's really spelled out beautifully. So these are ways that we can do ongoing learning and growth. And in just a moment, I'm going to talk to you about intercultural competency and suggest that to you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to describe, investigate, evaluate, and change policies and procedures. Now, I got really intense there for a moment on purpose, because oftentimes we just say evaluate and change. But it's important for us as we begin this process of engaging with culture to just learn how to describe. So if I were to show you a picture, and I thought about doing this, but I didn't want to take us down a rabbit hole, so I didn't put it in. But if I were to show you a picture and say, describe the picture, how many of you think you would get into the investigating and the evaluating in the picture, right? Think of how difficult it is just to describe what you see. Like if you're looking at my screen now, describe what you see around me, Can you just articulate the things there and not get into the, I wonder what that light is on the other side of his barrier there. I wonder where he got that barrier from. Why is that barrier there? We start evaluating, making judgments and investigating right away. So I want you to describe your policies first. Maybe it's just writing them down and talking about them. Then investigate why you have those policies there. And that's going to lead you to the evaluating. As you investigate each policy, evaluate, is that a policy that's going to serve your purpose of bringing more people into your organization, giving them more access? And if it doesn't serve the purpose, will you be bold enough to change it and put a new policy in its place, or just get rid of it maybe? Third, developing authentic relationships with the communities of color. And this goes back to the questions earlier that what was on your minds. This is the big thing. We jump into collaboration, which is not truly collaboration, and partnership, which is not truly partnership. It's just come join me for a program. We jump in with an end game in mind. And in transformational action planning, we need to just have conversations first and get to know people. So we did an initiative, we called it Stone Soup, based on that old story, where we just reached out to some arts organizations just to have dinner. Literally, we sat down to dinner and said, we want to get to know about you. The one that comes to mind is connecting with one of our local dance organizations here of Mexican descent. And Becky is the director of the organization there. Love Becky. Los Alegres Bailadores is the name of the group. We just sat to dinner, myself, Philip Burnell, one of our board members, and then it was Becky, one of her teachers, and another one of their community members. And it was really kind of awkward at first. you know, because we just emailed and said, can we get together for dinner? You've been here for 30 years. We've been here for 30, 40 years. We just want to get to know you. It took a little bit. We warmed up to each other. We started talking, got to know more about them. We shared about us. And then by the end of that conversation, there was a noodle of an idea. It was like, maybe we should come back and talk again about doing something at some point in time. What that led to is it's led to 3 collaborations. One with our Singers of This Age youth choir, where Becky came and taught them traditional Mexican stick dancing that we did as a part of our Cantere concert. One was for them to come and join us on one of our programs where their dancers came and they were a part of our concert. While we were singing, they provided dance to go along with the music. And another that hasn't happened yet, but is because of COVID, is for us to go and join them on one of their programs. And so it was the idea of, we just met to talk. And I can't tell you how refreshing it was, because this is not normal operation at Vocal Essence. And it's not the way I operate either, because I'm just go, 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 and I'm the visionary, right? I have so many ideas in my head. So I'm guilty of already having the dream. And what I'm learning to do, friends, is to have that dream, but to just hold it there, to park it in the bike rack, engage in some conversation, and then let that turn into something else. This whole series is the idea of that. Liz came to me and said, what about coming and doing a conversation with us, just talking to us about Singers of This Age? That was her idea, that it come from the Nats team and the greater resource. And actually, I don't know if everybody had been in the conversation yet. It might have just been Nats first. But what happened from there was us going back and forth saying, well, what if we did this? And what if I brought other people in and we made it a little larger? And here we are a month later, or 2 months later from planning. But, we've had a month together of interaction because it was an idea that then gestated with other people bringing ideas to the table. And now we've created a wider circle and a more rich circle. So I can't say enough about, if you really want to see your patrons grow, your audiences change, I shouldn't say grow, change, your audiences change, your membership change, your studios change, then you have to take time to develop authentic relationships. This could be the form of a listening zone type thing that Tasidra talked about, where there's surveys, there's interviews, but it has to be follow-up. It has to be continuous and not a one-off. The fourth thing, and the most challenging for us in these times of limited resources, is to commit resources. Time, talent, finances to communities of color. You just think about it in your neighborhoods now. If we commit time and we're on the front lines in accompliceship rather than allyship, we are right there with you, standing beside you. What that does to build trust, what that does to show your intention to be there, not just when the newspaper articles are being written, but after the press is gone. If you commit your financial resources and your talents without getting anything in return, other than the satisfaction of being a good citizen and a great neighbor, then you again instill that sense of trust that you are in this for the long haul. And it's not a show. So this is my theory of change, that if you engage in these 4 steps, and there is a little back and forth, I see it as somewhat sequential. You should start with yourself first, start learning, and keep that going. Look within your organization and what makes you tick, and what you need to investigate deep within to make room for others. And then at the same time, begin to listen and learn and talk to other people, develop real sustainable relationships where you can ask a Black colleague who's not in the classical music world, I'm looking at doing this and I really want to get people to come to this program who are from the Black community. What do you think I need to do? Is this plan going to work? Like when you have a relationship with someone like that, where you can invite them to coffee and ask them those questions, then they will answer you. We will answer you happily. It won't feel like a burden because we know you. We've developed a relationship. But if you come to me right away up front and just say, hey, can I call you to ask you about this one specific thing and I want an answer to know, that's when you get into the sense of you're just using me. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how serious you are in this work. So it is a marathon. It takes time. I hope I made my point there. So I wish we had another year and we don't. So I made this as simple as I could in 3 slides. This is what I consider to be the best way for you to develop ongoing learning as an individual or as an organization, and that's to engage in intercultural competency training. There are several models of this. I'll show you one in just a moment here, the IDI, the Intercultural Developmental Inventory, and there are many facilitators in your areas who are trained to lead you through this process. It's typically a 12 to 36 month process, depending on how you want to do it, where there's lots of deep interaction. First, you're developing a more complex way of looking at and interacting with culture. It's allowing you to expand your skill set in intercultural interactions, and it will help you to reflect on your own values, attitudes, and beliefs. And that's so important that we do that, because we, as I said earlier, we don't recognize the unintentional harm that we're doing, or better said, the unintentional lens that we put on everything, that we see everything with, without unpacking it and seeing how that connects to the rest of the world. You can see the third column there, intercultural competency training helps you, it's developmental, it helps you to make sense of your experiences. It gives you the capacity to experience commonalities and differences within increasing complexity. And that's the key thing there, noticing the subtle differences. And most importantly, when you get to adaptive behavior, it gives you the capacity to shift your behavior and your mindset based on the cultural context. Now, people of color, particularly those of African descent, as I understand it, tend to move through this continuum faster because most of our life is spent code shifting, moving back and forth. So Mitchell Hamner has this version of intercultural development inventory. There's an intercultural development continuum, and you take a quick test. I shouldn't say quick, it's a 50-question test where it then places you on this continuum. It's not about good or bad, it's about where you are and how you interact with culture. So you can see on the left side of the continuum, it's more of a monocultural mindset, those who see so much sameness that they miss difference. Then there's the next category, polarization, where you judge difference. And polarization can also turn into reversal, which happens most often these days with white people who are upset with white culture and all that's happened. It's a lot of guilt. And so you get thrown into reversal, which is a form of polarization where you're judging everything. You can't stand your culture. And again, you're in a monocultural mindset. Even though you may be wanting to help others and you want to be woke, there's that term again, everything's coming from your monocultural mindset. Minimization is where 62% of people who take this test are. We de-emphasize difference, we overemphasize similarities. This is how I grew up. This is most of my life in Fort Benning, outside of Fort Benning, Georgia, military town. My parents called our house the Model UN in elementary school because I had James, who was my Vietnamese friend, and Larry, my Filipino friend, and I had my black friends, I had my Jehovah's Witnesses friends. I mean, I didn't see difference. I mean, yeah, you look different, but we were just people. And that's cool as a kid, right? I carried that through a lot of my adulthood where I didn't really, I mean, I knew my own heritage, but I didn't talk about it in terms of a separate identity. I was emphasizing sameness and living in that sense of we're all the same and we can all get along because we're just human. We bleed the same, man, you know? But there's this similarities and the differences, the subtleties of differences that we have to acknowledge when we move to an intercultural concept where we deeply comprehend difference and then we begin to bridge across difference. And adaptation, only 1%, 1.5% of people who take this test are in adaptation, where you not only see difference and you appreciate difference and you seek out difference and you're curious about it, you bridge across difference by being able to shift. Because oftentimes when people come to our organizations to collaborate with us, we expect them to shift. We don't say it, but subconsciously we expect them to change and we never change. And in white dominant culture, white dominant arts institutions of classical origin, this is our biggest challenge, friends. If we are not willing to shift and adapt and bridge a cost difference, we will never have sustainable change when it comes to this cultural identity thing. There will always be people of color who are part of the art form because they get the bug, right? Like me and like many of my peers. But on a wider scale, they're not going to come over because they don't see a sense of meeting in the middle and a sense of understanding their point of view as well. So denial, I believe there are about 4 to 5% of people there. Polarization, about 15 to 16%. And think about our political climate right now as you hear this. Minimization, 62%. Acceptance, only 14%. So you can see most people are right smack in the middle. It makes sense as to how society works. So if your organization were to go through, or you personally were to go through this, a facilitator would take you on a journey through, workshops. You know how these things work, where it would guide you through very intentional conversations and action learning projects to take you where you are, to accept where you are, and then to help you engage in experiences intentionally to see how you change over time. Because the goal is to move towards the right. I put on here another form of the intercultural continuum, just so you can see how it would work in relationship to the Me Too movement there. And I just like this one because it has some real clear statements there. Denial, I don't see a problem. To adaptation, I will not only strive to learn about culture of women and behaviors, but I will model and hold others accountable for behaviors respectful of women. So that's a really powerful statement there. Taking it a step further there, this is intercultural sensitivity. So I just wanted you to see this is Milton Bennett, I think is his last name there. Yeah. This was developed in 1993, and I think this was the precursor to the IDI. This is just a model. And take a look at the ethnocentric stages. The first experience is not to experience the difference. Us versus them. Then the false sense of sensitivity, assuming we're all the same. And I want to say to my friend who asked the question earlier about those who are woke, I harped on that, and the unintentional harm. I think the unintentional harm happens in minimization because we have good intentions, we are curious, we want to engage, but until we acknowledge the differences and begin to be curious about it and dig into it, that's where those little microaggressions happen, right? And then you look on the right side of the stage here, of the continuum here, growing awareness of your own culture and then other. And then looking at the interaction with others. And the big thing that I think is really interesting, internalizing 2 or more cultures typically takes 3+ years. It's a long-term process, friends. I wanted you to see this to get you inspired. So in 2018, before we dove into intercultural competency training at Vocal Essence, we had just done a planning process with EMC Arts out of New York. And in that process, we came up with this strategic plan. So I just wanted you to see this. You can still hear me, right? I had to put my headset in because the kids came back inside. So we came up with these 4 outcomes on the left, and then we came up with these actions on the right. These actions were in conjunction, or now are in conjunction with our own continuous IDI work that we're doing as an organization. So I wanted you to see one organization's way of tackling this. Notice it's not so specific to individual programs. Like look at number 3, our portfolio programs are responsive to community needs and informed by community feedback. So rather than talking about specific programs, we wanted to look at the process by which we program. Our engagement programs deepen relationships in these key areas because we decided we wanted to focus on Spanish-speaking families with children, young professional African Americans, and then older adults. So that's where we've been spending a lot of our time and our energies. Even though there's other areas, that's our focus for right now at this time. So as you begin your own action planning, I've given you a few things now to reflect on as I come back here to these 4 steps. opportunities for learning and growth, evaluate, investigate, describe change policy procedure, develop authentic relationships, commit resources to communities of color, you now have a planning process that you can begin to think about, friends, to change your organizations. When we get back from the break, we're going to talk about this one. I want to take these 2 minutes real fast to show you a couple of things before we get into the after party, and to issue a challenge as well. So the first thing is, and you're going to see all the slides all together for just a second before I can open up here. Okay, so just a reminder, we're going to put this in a format where you all can have it. You can have all my slides, but also set this up in a document where you can then take it and adapt it for your situation, these actions and these transformational steps. When we left, this is where I left you to challenge you. I want to challenge each of you in your own way in your organizations to commit to advancing anti-racism initiatives within, and I should change this, the choral and singing arts. I really want to challenge you to do that, and I'm going to drop some resources on you in just a second. And this is what I shared with you in the menu. This will also be part of your planning process, asking the who, what, the where, the when, and the how. If you look at these questions, again, as a part of our menu for change, in conjunction with the action planning process that I gave you, it's going to help you to really assess why you're doing what you're doing. And if you look at this in terms of racial engagement or gender engagement or cultural, however you want to process it there, it's going to really help guide the steps that you take, these 5 questions. So I'm going to get out of this share, and don't worry about writing it down. We're going to put it in the menu for you all to see. Really quickly, I'm going to show you a few things here on it. So these will be put in the menu for you as well. This is the document that I talked about with the summary of the stages of racial identity development. And you can see the people who did this work, and it gives you, like I said, a summary. So it's good reading, and it's quick reading just to get an understanding for how different people identify and get in touch with their identity. Because one of the things we didn't get to talk about today was cultural disengagement. And that's something I identify with as a Black man who mostly works in white spaces, of how I had to really make sure I didn't lose sight of my Blackness and my culture. This website, Racial Equity Tools, is gold, and there's lots of things here: plans, actions, strategies, curriculum, things of that nature. Here's another document here about scaffolding anti-racist resources. So if you're looking for books to read, videos to watch, there's a curated list of things here already and what to use it for. And this is not my work. This is all stuff that's come to me from other places that I wanted to share with you to make it easier for you. So again, this is all going in the menu. And then finally, if you have not heard about the Black Voices Matter pledge, I want to encourage you to take some time and go to the website and read this wonderfully written presentation as to why this is important, and then what the pledge is, because the pledge in and of itself is also another iteration of an action plan. You could take it step by step and begin to look at how in different contexts you can help to deconstruct our current systems. And these was put together by several of my dear friends and Minnesotans, Minnesota graduates, as well as singers. Reggie Mobley is one of the ones who was on this team, who's I know is a Boston area singer. So we don't have time to go through it now, but I wanted to introduce it to you, and it'll be in the menu as well. So I want you to have these resources, and I know you're getting bombarded with a lot of things, but just take your time and kind of, look through them one at a time. One small step. Just put one foot in front of the other, take one small step. My challenge I want to issue to you all, and Liz and I will figure out how we're going to do this. We've talked about this, Liz. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I want to challenge you to stay in touch, not only with each other, but with me. One of the things that was a surprise blessing this summer, 3 organizations that reached out to me early in COVID about things related to COVID specifically, and one was related to racial relations and racial equity, reached out and asked for information and asked to just talk. And so I spent time with them. We had a couple of phone sessions. Without me knowing it, each of these organizations who are not connected to each other, they each got back to me about 2 weeks, in the last 2 weeks, and told me the results of what they did. And I can't tell you how affirming it is to hear someone say, hey, thanks for talking to us. Here's what we did. Here's where we are. And it led to more conversation. A couple of the groups now I'm doing Zooms with their choirs and stuff like that, right? So it's this sense of keeping connected so that we encourage each other to keep the work going. So Liz and the team and I, we're gonna find a way for us to keep this conversation going. Maybe it's the forum, or maybe it's a checkpoint. 3 months from now, we send out an email and ask you to tell us what you've been up to. 6 months from now, where are you? 9 months, a year. No guilt, no judgment, just to encourage you and to also encourage us to see how you're taking the information. So I'm 3 minutes on your time. So thank you for this series. I really appreciate you hanging with us and taking part in this. It's been so meaningful to prepare. And thank you, Liz, Nats Boston, the Singers Resource, the Greater Boston Choral Consortium, for your leadership and vision in making this happen. And we'll have the meeting after we get these final announcements from Liz and the team.
Well, Philip, I would be severely remiss if we did not give a moment just to clap for you. So thank you so much for leading us on this journey. Take a moment and see all of these wonderful faces and how appreciative they are for all of this work. And really, it came out of, like Philip was saying, building an authentic relationship over time. That then when the call was in the air to start this work together, Philip answered it and built this beautiful series. And thank you for bringing in the collaborators as well. Our guest presenters were incredible, and they've also given us a lot to think about. So at this point, you will be hearing from us with some follow-up actions and how we're going to stay together in some of those smaller communities, a larger community that will touch base every so often to just check in how this work is going. If you have any resources you'd like to share, please do so. You can drop them in the chat now, or you can email me. You all have my vice president at natsboston.org email. I know you've gotten probably too many emails from me. But if you have any questions or you just want to continue the conversation, we'll have our meeting after the meeting here, the little dessert, as Philip calls it, for the next 25 minutes or so. But we thank you all for being here, each one of you bringing your own experiences, expertise, questions, heartfulness, mindfulness, all of the gifts. So thank you all. We're going to do one more set of clapping for you all for being at the table. So thank you all.